I have a lot of friends who are concerned about their weight, especially a lot of women friends, and it hurts my heart to hear them talk about themselves in a shameful way, like, oh, I got to get to the gym, I've got to lose this weight, I've got to lose this weight. And, in my own experiences, I have, 40 pounds ago, I didn't feel very good, and that mental, that self-talk about, oh, I've got to lose this weight, and that guilt and that shame that goes along with being overweight tended to perpetuate that cycle. So what I found in my own experiences was that when I focused on health and fitness rather than just simply weight loss, the weight came off of its own accord. For instance, I read a cookbook, and it talked about, well, it wasn't a cookbook, it was a nutrition book, and it had recipes in it. So to me, I'm a chef, so everything's a cookbook because it has a recipe in it. And in this book, he talked about different foods that are beneficial, because we hear so much about, oh, don't eat this, or don't eat that, or, thou shalt not. But this book focused on foods that are highly beneficial for the human body. Basically lots of fruits and vegetables. That tends to be universal through all the different nutrition philosophies I've studied. One of the universal threads is fruits and vegetables. So by learning to embrace the foods that I loved and hadn't even met yet, like, for example, this book listed plums as they're not only tasty, they're full of fiber, they have vitamins. I learned to incorporate plums into my diet and found that my sweet tooth lost its control. So what I found was that rather than telling myself, don't eat the ice cream, don't eat the ice cream, by incorporating more of the healthier things into my diet, I found that I had less desire for the unhealthy things. So by focusing on the positive things that we should do for health, the other things tend to lose their power. By eating food that's healthy and satisfying, the cravings for the unhealthy things tend to dissipate of their own accord. So I read about this study recently. It was done by the U.S. National Institute on Aging. They did a study to see who are the longest lived groups of people in the world. 3 of these groups at the top of the study were Okinawa. They lived in Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, and the Seventh-day Adventists. So the common traits of these people are, one of the big ones, it's not a surprise, they don't smoke. They're physically active every day. And let me just say on the side note, we don't have to join a gym or buy any fancy exercise equipment or do anything fantastic. I know plenty of friends who have gotten themselves physically fit by simply taking a good long walk every day. And folks who do manual labor tend to not have to worry about that. Another common trait for these groups of people is that they are socially engaged. Having a social network is beneficial. I know in my personal experience, when I'm in contact with friends who are loving and supportive and vice versa, I'm happier. So that's not a surprise either. Also, the big one, which I'd like to focus on today, is that these groups of folks eat lots of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. On that note, seeing as how in our culture carbs have gotten such a bad rap, I would like to speak up in favor of complex carbohydrates. Vegetables have complex carbohydrates. Whole grains. Whole grains before they're processed and ground into flours and bread and noodles and all that kind of stuff, which those, if they're whole grain bread product, a whole grain pasta product, they're okay to eat once in a while, but generally our body is designed to function on the whole grain. Brown rice is a whole grain. When it's turned into white rice, it's stripped of nutrients and fiber, and that's why it's less satisfying. Eating a bowl of brown rice is a far different experience from eating a bowl of white rice. And white flour, I'd like to say, white flour and white rice, these things came about because to extend their shelf life, to make them less desirable to weevils. And, personally, if the weevils don't want it, neither do I. So these products didn't come about from a purpose of making things more nutritious, basically for cost effectiveness and shelf life. Another component of whole grains I'd like to talk about is sprouted grains. This may sound weird. I've never heard of it. The first time I heard of a sprouted grain, it sounded to me like something that had gone bad. If you leave the bread sitting out too long, it starts to sprout things. So actually, sprouted grains, which I can find at my local grocery store in the freezer, they call it Ezekiel bread, taken from an old scripture that talks about making bread out of certain grains and legumes. And the miraculous thing is, when this particular combination of grains and legumes is combined, it creates a complete protein. So this bread is high in fiber, it's a complete protein, it's very satisfying. It takes a little getting used to if you're raised on Wonder Bread, but personally, that's my favorite these days. Sprouting actually releases more nutrients from the grain. Whole grains are great. They're chock full of B vitamins, fiber, satisfying, tasty. And if it doesn't taste good, keep playing around in the kitchen and make it so. So, one of the first times I made a pot of brown rice, it was kind of boring and bland. So I put a little vegetable broth in it, and that made all the difference. And then I started playing around with different seasonings. These days I'm really learning to love sea vegetables. And if you've never experimented with a little sea vegetable in your soup or your rice, give it a shot. Sea vegetables are high in nutrients and actually can make your food amazingly tasty. Just go to any Japanese restaurant and order anything with a little bit of kombu in it or wakame. That great miso soup that they make has wakame in it, the little green bits. So, things to me that at one point in my life sounded a little scary, seaweed, actually have turned out to be personal favorites. And the benefit is, from trying something new like that, the benefit is that I feel better.